Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Next week, voters will decide who will be the Republican nominee for North Carolina Lieutenant Governor. That's when Jim O'Neill and Hal Weatherman face each other in a primary runoff. The winner will face Democrat Rachel Hunt in November. O'Neill and Weatherman have different ideas for how to lead the office, and WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht is here to tell us about them. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Now, early voting is underway, and Election Day is May 14th. The runoff for the GOP nomination for lieutenant governor is likely to be the highest profile. Who's running?
Well, yeah, Jim O'Neill is the Forsyth County District Attorney, and he's had that position since 2009. He's previously run for statewide office back in 2020 when he ran for Attorney General, and he came only 14,000 votes short of defeating incumbent Democrat Josh Stein. Then you have Hal Weatherman. This is his first run for office as a candidate. He's mostly worked behind the scenes, but he's been in North Carolina politics a long time. He was chief of staff for former Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest. Forrest ran for governor in 2020, and Weatherman was his campaign manager. And now he's running for himself. He's on the road and says that he has a lot of connections through his many years in North Carolina, and he plans on using them to propel himself to the Republican nomination.
Now, as you report, the lieutenant governor role isn't very powerful. What does it entail?
Right. The lieutenant governor in this state runs separately from the governor. You know, in some states they run together as a single ticket. But here we've had governors and lieutenant governors of different parties. And the lieutenant governor doesn't really have much power to enact laws or anything like that. The lieutenant governor sits on the State Board of Education and other commissions. The lieutenant governor also presides over the Senate. And what that means is, you know, when the Senate's in session, they call on people to speak, or when they want to introduce a bill or debate a bill, things like that. But otherwise, you know, the lieutenant governor can't issue executive orders or even cast a vote in the Senate unless there's a tie.
So if the position doesn't really wield that much power, why would anybody want to do it?
Well, what the office lacks in power, it sort of offers up and makes up for an opportunity. And what I mean by that is there are other officials who are elected statewide, like the agriculture commissioner, the labor commissioner. They have departments to run. They have people who answer to them. Now, the lieutenant governor has a staff, but he or she doesn't have a department like that. So that means they have more time to travel the state, more time to weigh in on the issues of the day, and to sort of build a network of supporters throughout North Carolina in case they ever want to run for higher office. And every single one of them has done that since 1961.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about the Republican candidates for lieutenant governor in North Carolina. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht about the race for North Carolina lieutenant governor. Paul, O'Neill and Weatherman are running to replace Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. He's a Republican. He's now running for governor, and he really raised his profile in the position of lieutenant governor. Will O'Neill and Weatherman be able to do the same, you think?
It'll be harder for them because Mark Robinson is such a unique political figure. He has this rags to riches story, both in life and in politics, where only 2 years before he ran for lieutenant governor, he was a nobody in politics. No one knew him. You know, there was a video of him speaking to the Greensboro City Council about gun rights that went viral, and conservative political pundits picked up on it. They started talking to him, and next thing you know, he's running for the Republican nomination for lieutenant governor, and he wins. And then he wins the office, and now he's, you know, the most high-profile state politician for the Republicans. So Jim O'Neill and Hal Weatherman do not come with that same novelty, if you will. O'Neill has been district attorney since 2009. Hal Weatherman has been working behind the scenes for just as long, I believe. They're both they're weird because they're known and they're unknown at the same time. A lot of people within the Republican Party base, they know who they are. They've heard their names before. They've met Hal Weatherman at campaign events here and there, and you know they know O'Neill ran for office a few years ago. but at the same time, they're not stars like Robinson is, and it'll be hard for them to establish that sort of fandom among the Republican base.
And Robinson's really used that star power to advance his beliefs. What has he focused on while in office?
Well, another unique thing about Robinson is that he's focused on social issues like abortion and LGBTQ rights and things like that. And, for a lot of Republicans, they start to steer away from that. Those are controversial issues where, there are even people within the Republican Party who believe in LGBTQ rights and abortion rights, or who are just, squeamish about it. But Robinson is not. He's forceful about his beliefs, and he's gone to events and rallies and churches to talk about them. And sort of his attitude that he'll never back down got the attention of former President Donald Trump. And he's endorsed by former President Donald Trump. And, just in 2018, Robinson was this nobody, and now he's a featured speaker at events like CPAC, like this conservative political conference that has a national platform. So he's really used it to raise his profile.
And have O'Neill and Weatherman said what they'll focus on if they manage to win the general election in November?
They did, actually. I asked them. I said, what causes are top of mind for you? And O'Neill, no surprise, it's law enforcement. He says he wants to advocate for law enforcement agencies, police, sheriffs, things like that. He's really disappointed that years ago some people wanted to defund police departments, and he said that's lowered morale, and departments have trouble recruiting officers now. He wants to use the office to sort of help legislators come up with bills that can help these agencies. And for Weatherman, he wants to, and this surprised me, he wants to use it to promote the trades, the blue-collar jobs. He says that society is sort of cast him aside and doesn't help these people out, and mostly promotes white-collar jobs. So he wants to encourage people to go into those professions where you work with your hands, as he put it.
And have their political careers sort of shaped their strategies in these platforms?
Oh, definitely. With O'Neill, he told me that as district attorney, he's frankly just exhausted from talking to parents who've lost children to fentanyl, other drugs, and even to gang violence. And so that's always top of mind for him, because he takes those calls and he speaks with these victims' families and things like that. And with Weatherman, as a political operative, he's been able to witness the Republican Party sort of shift its focus, especially since Trump came along, toward working people, blue-collar working people, have a history of voting Democrat decades ago. That's shifted. So Weatherman, he's been on the ground here in North Carolina, often on behalf of other people like Dan Forrest, but meeting with people who work with their hands. And Weatherman himself on the trail for his campaign shows up to these events in jeans. He's not wearing a suit like O'Neill does. So yes, they both draw on their backgrounds, and they're both using that to try to appeal to voters.
Now, turnout for runoffs tends to be pretty low in North Carolina. What are we expecting for turnout next week?
It may be 10% or less, frankly. That's what the political experts tell me. And to sort of put that in perspective, back in 2022, we had the midterm elections that November, right? Well, Democrats didn't fare well. There was a U.S. Senate race on the ballot. They lost. Afterward, they sort of audited, their performance, right, and how well they got out the vote. Well, they were disappointed if some counties only got 40%. We're not even we may get a quarter of that for the runoff for this statewide race. As for who can participate, that's a big reason why. You can only participate if you're an unaffiliated voter or a registered Republican in this case. And you cannot participate if you're an unaffiliated voter who already voted in March in another party's primary.
Now, there hasn't been a ton of polling leading up to the primaries for lieutenant governor. What do political experts predict?
They really hesitated to predict a winner just because it's so hard with a campaign like this, where neither candidate has a bunch of name recognition. It's on a date that people might forget about. It's in May instead of March on Super Tuesday. And there was no clear front runner from the March primary. Weatherman got 19%, O'Neill got 15%. You need 30% to get the nomination. Nobody got that. They say Weatherman benefits from having an endorsement from Robinson, who obviously has a big platform, but he's never run a race for himself before. And then you have O'Neill. He has run before and almost won, but he's from Forsyth County. There's some voters there, but it's not like being from Raleigh or Charlotte where you can really pull from a bigger fan base. So it's really hard to say.
Well, we know you'll be following the race closely next week. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
That's WRAL State Government reporter Paul Specht. For his preview of the GOP primary runoff for Lieutenant Governor, visit the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.